What's up guys, welcome back to the e-bike builder channel. In this video we're going to build this Schwinn AXUM FS into an e-bike. So you might be wondering, why did you pick this bike? Well, the motor that I want to use, it has M14 axles on it. So it's got some axles, you gotta use nuts, to hook it onto the bike. And so a lot of mountain bikes, they have through axle dropouts in the rear. So it's just like a circle. And then the axle goes through the circle, right? But you can't put like a hub motor axle into a through axle, right? Like you need slotted dropouts. So that is why I bought this bike for this project, is because this bike has a quick release rear hub. So this is 141 millimeter quick release. So it's like 141 millimeter like boost quick release is what they call it. So this is different than like a through axle, and it's got the slotted dropout, right? So we can just slide the motor axles right up in there. And so that's why I bought this bike, right? Because like it's pretty hard to find full suspension mountain bikes that have a tapered head tube that allow you to upgrade the suspension fork to a good one, right? So I needed that tapered head tube, and then it's got that rear suspension. I can get the motor in those dropouts, and then also it's got enough room on the frame to fit a big triangle battery with like 20 amp hours of 48 volts or 52 volts, right? Basically, like I tore the bike down, I looked it over, made sure that the suspension, like the pivot points were moving right, and now we're gonna build it into an e-bike. Okay, so we're gonna open up this motor. So this is the Bafang G900 motor kit. And I've already done a video on this where like I go through like everything in this kit and I install it on a bike using just everything that comes with the kit, right? So it's very easy to just buy this kit, and then you basically just slap the wheel on the bike, and I'll show you how easy this is. Okay, so what do we have here? We've got alright, so in the box we've got the motor, and we've got, it looks like a display is down here. So this is just like an inexpensive display. And then so I'm gonna pull that motor out so that we can get this box with all the other stuff in it. So I'm just gonna quickly run through everything that comes in this hub motor kit here. So we've got an instruction manual, Powallon hub motor kit system, where it shows you every step of installing the hub motor. So we take out the original wheel, dismantle the original disc, install the inner and outer tires to the motor wheel, dismantle the flywheel, take out original bicycle inner and outer tires, original disc, install it on the motor wheel. So there's some Chinese instructions. Then we have it's a cassette tool, so this has got the chain whip on it, and then it's also got like this bottom bracket tool on it. And they give you this, so the chain whip is for installing the cassette, but then this tool is for loosening off your bottom bracket so that you can fit the pedal assist sensor on there. So then here's a controller box. It's got kind of a case that goes around the controller, and then inside of here, this is our motor controller. Right, so the motor controller, it's got some various, so here's the cable that connects to the motor. This is an L1121 connector. It's a Bafang proprietary thing. And we've got, this is the battery leads, the DC battery leads. So this goes to the battery. The black is the negative and the red is the positive. Then this thing, I think this is for the wiring harness. So I think that has 8 pins in there. So that's for the 1T8 wiring harness. And that's this thing right here. Right, so this is the wiring harness. This right here connects to the controller, that thing I just showed you, right? So it connects like this. And then this wire runs, this harness runs up your bike to the bars. And then the Bafang UART displays, they plug into this green thing with the 5 pins in there. And then there's one for the throttle. It's this male connector, that's for the throttle. And then we've got these 2 yellow female connectors with the 3 pins, and those are for the brake cutoffs. So there's the, oh, and then on the controller, it looks like there's one other thing here, and I don't know if this is for the throttle or the lights. We'll have to take, but this is probably for the lights, I would imagine. There might be another, yeah, there's one more in here that hooks up to the pedal assist sensor, this thing. This yellow one. So that's the motor controller and all of its connections. You basically just plug the controller into the battery and then you plug it into all of the different things on your bike that are electrical. And then, so what else do we have here? We've got, it looks like a headlight. And so I think I tried this light before, but there was always something rattling inside of it. I don't know. I mean, it's a light. If you want a headlight, this little connector connects to that thing that I just showed you on the controller. It's a 2-pin JST. Some kind of a JST, I forget what those are. The Grand Tech kind. JST SM or something. So then it gives us 2 tire levers. There's a bunch of zip ties. This is a crank puller for, like, you gotta pull the cranks off of the spindle on the bottom bracket before you can take the bottom bracket apart to put the pedal assist sensor on there. So this is the pedal assist sensor, and it basically, like, actually, I'm not even exactly sure why they give you all the bottom brackets, Jules, because it seems like this thing just presses in. It seems like this thing just presses in to the outside of the bottom bracket from the side. So, and is this a left side one? Like, basically, you want to put this onto the square taper spindle before you put the crank on, right? And then when your cranks are spinning, this little thing right here will be spinning, and the pedal assist sensor will detect that you're pedaling, and then it'll make the motor go, right? But I'm not going to use this pedal assist sensor. I don't really, like, it's a cadence sensor, so it's just like as soon as your cranks start rotating at all, the motor just starts going at whatever assist level that you have it on. And so it works okay for riding on the streets, but I want to ride this bike on the trails, and we're not going to be using this pedal assist sensor because it would just, like, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't be a good experience riding this pedal assist sensor off-road. So we're not going to do that. It does come with a quick tool, and I've got one somewhere over here. I'll just open this one up. So it comes with a quick tool. It's got a bunch of hex wrenches on it. It shows right here. So pretty nice. They send you a little quick tool. It's also got, like, some little sockets in there, and a flathead and a Phillips. It's actually a pretty good little quick tool. Like the hex wrenches, I think they might kind of, like, the tolerance on the hex wrenches is, like, sometimes I noticed, like, they had a little bit of trouble fitting into certain things, but for the most part, it's a pretty handy little tool, especially if you don't have all that stuff. It's a good tool to include with the kit. So we got that. And then we have, what do we got here? Oh, we've got a throttle here. I forgot that this throttle was in there. This is a better throttle than the one that I put on there. So I might actually put this throttle on the bike instead, because this one, I like how this throttle, it's got this clamp, it clamps onto the bars, so you can take this throttle on and off without having to take everything off of your bars, which is very convenient, right? So this kit comes with a very nice, what are these, like 300X throttles? Yeah. So it comes with a very nice 300X throttle. If you wanted to just buy one of these, they're like $15 just for this. So it comes with pretty much like the nicest e-bike thumb throttle that you can get. Or like, you know, like my favorite. And then there's some zip ties in there. And then there's a cassette tool. And I think that this is for taking the cassette off of your old wheel. But then I noticed previously, like this tool, it doesn't actually fit over the motor axles. So you can't use this tool to tighten the cassette onto the motor. It's kind of weird. Like they give you a tool that works for removing it from a different wheel, but it doesn't actually work for the wheel that with the motor on it. It's kind of a weird situation. So just be forewarned, like you might be able to do the removal with this, but like I have to use a different tool when I'm putting my cassette onto this motor wheel, because the diameter of this hole, like the motor axle doesn't go through there. It's like bigger than this hole. So I mean, you could try drilling this out, like drilling the hole a little bit bigger, or else just get a different tool that has a bigger hole from the get-go. And I'll show you which tool I use if I can find it. So yeah, that's basically everything. Oh yeah, and then there's like your mechanical brake levers, right? So these are just like your typical like cheap e-bike mechanical brake levers that have the brake cutoff on them, so that these are for e-bikes, so that when you pull the brake lever, it's got something in the side of there. You can see it down there, it's like pink, where when that little switch goes open down there, it knows that the brake is on. So that's how these work. And they work all right if you've got mechanical brakes, but mechanical brakes kind of suck. And so if you pay a little bit extra, you can buy brake sensors that you glue onto your brake levers. And then you can put those brake sensors on hydraulic brakes. But I got my kit with the brake levers because it's a little bit cheaper to get it with the brake levers. So if you're going to use mechanical brakes, you can use the levers, but I would probably recommend to pay a little bit more and get the brake sensors if you want to have cutoffs for your brakes, because you can put the brake sensors on a mechanical brake as well, and it works in both situations, mechanical or hydraulic. So I'm gonna put this stuff back in here for now. I'm gonna keep the tire levers and some of the stuff out of there. We'll put this stuff back in here. Put the pedal assist back in there. I don't think I'm gonna use this controller. I'm just gonna cut the motor cable off of it because I have a FLIPSKY 75100 Pro V2 VESC controller that I'm gonna use instead. But this controller that came with the kit, I have to cut that cable off of it so that I can wire it up to the FlipSki, so I'll show you how we do that. But yeah, so that's everything in the box. I'll probably try and use this wiring harness even with the VESC controller. Like I'll just rewire this thing so that it hooks up to my VESC controller, because otherwise it's a lot nicer to just have one wire that goes up your bike, and then at the end of it, it kind of breaks off into the different, like the display and the throttle and the brake sensors. Because otherwise, like, you would need a whole bunch of wires. Like, if you ran each of these as a separate wire, separate thing that's not in a wiring harness, you would have like a whole bunch of wires going up your bike and it wouldn't be very clean looking. So I'll probably use this. We got to get this motor onto the bike. What is this? Oh, so there's like, it looks like there's some brake rotor bolts that are just like, what is going on here? Yeah, so this looks like garbage in the box, but they're actually brake rotor bolts because I can see the Loctite on them. So, all right, so now we're gonna need the wheel that came with the bike because I'm gonna take the tire off of it. I did put the Schwalbe Magic Mary tire on the front. Well, it was already on that wheel that was in the fork. But on this rear one, I don't know. I guess we can try out the Schwinn AXUM FS tire that came with the bike. This is the wheel that came with the bike. So let's see here. We just gotta deflate this and then get the tire off of it. And then we'll transfer the tube and the tire over to that other wheel with the motor. So you basically just need some way to let all of the air out of the tube and then take the tire and the tube off. And we'll swap everything over. So it looks like this has a Schrader valve, which I don't mind at all. I actually kind of prefer Schrader valves because I'm not a bike snob. I'm just a practical everyday guy, and I like Schraders. All right. So it's mostly deflated. I'm gonna get some tire levers here. I like Gorilla levers. Link in the description. They say that they're unbreakable. I've actually broke a couple of them, but it takes quite a lot. It's quite hard to break them. So these are the levers that I like. And then we're just gonna start over here like, oh man. So this tire, it seems like it fits on this rim a little bit better than they usually do on these bikes. Like usually it's really easy to get the tires off of these things. So let's take the tube out. So what do we got in here? It's a tube with a big yellow line on it. It feels a little bit lighter. It feels a little bit lighter than the tubes that I usually use. That's kind of weird. Huh. So it says it's a 29 by 2.4 to 2.8. It's kind of like a lightweight, weird, huh? All right. Get the tire off of this rim. There we go. All right, so I'm gonna get this tire that came on the bike onto this motor wheel. We're gonna swap the tire over. So let's see here. We got the tread. So the disc is over on the left side, so that we want the tire rotating forwards. So it looks like the tread is in the right rotation, and then we're just gonna get those tires started onto the rim so that we can get our tube into the little pocket. So let's find the valve hole over here, and we'll take our valve stem and then get it going into the valve hole, lined up with that. Once your tube is in the valve hole, it should be all lined up to get it into the tire. There we go. And then kind of start working around each side. Make sure that tube is going in there. Come back over to this side. Get it going onto the rim there. So as long as the tires aren't tubeless and your rim isn't tubeless, like you should be able to Should be able to get a tire on there without like too much. There we go. I didn't even need a lever to get the tire on there. All right. One thing I'm going to do before we continue on is I'm going to get some flat out into this inner tube. All right, so this is the tire sealant that I recommend. It's called Flat Out Quick Strike Technology. So this is the small tire formula. That's what you want for non-fat tires because it's a little bit more like liquidy and the viscosity isn't so thick. If you have fat tires on your e-bike, then you're going to want like the off-road formula, and it's a lot thicker and it works a lot better. But so how we install the flat out tire sealant is we take a valve core remover, and I'm going to remove the valve core from this Schrader valve that's in my tube. So let's get the valve core remover out of there. And if you have a Presta valve, sometimes Presta valve or Presta tubes, like the Presta valve doesn't have like a removable valve core. So if you're using Prestas, you might have to buy like a Continental tube or something that have the removable core. So then I'm gonna orient the valve thing over the side here so that when I'm pumping it in, it just kind of goes down from gravity. Otherwise, if it was just pumping it straight in there, like it might be trying to seal it while you're putting it in there. And then so if we look at our flat out on the thing here, it says MTB. It says 8 to 10 ounces. It says you can also put it on mopeds, scooters, one wheels. Less than 45 miles an hour moped. So it says it seals punctures up to 1/4 inch in the tread, works for 10 plus years, stays liquid, easy cleanup with water. So we're gonna do 8 to 10 ounces. And each pump of this thing is an ounce. So we're gonna go like this and maybe get it going sideways here so that it goes in there better. And then let's pump it in there. All right, here we go. Here we go. We're gonna start pumping. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and I'm gonna do a little bit extra for good measure. 11, 12, and then there's always a whole bunch that's like stuck. The hose. Oh, we can get this thing off here. Oh my god, it's hard to get this hose off of there, but usually I can. Let's see here. Oh, okay. Made a little bit of a mess. Not too bad. Okay, now we can just do this little maneuver that I do sometimes. There we go. To get that last little bit out of the tube and going in there. All right, so now I can take this tube out, put it back on the container, and then put that away for the next time. And then as the final step of installing the flat out tire sealant in the tube, I'm going to take this valve core remover tool, except this time we're going to tighten it back in there. To reinstall the valve core into the valve stem so that it'll hold air again. There we go. All right. So now we've got the flat out tire sealant in there. That should be all set. We just gotta air this thing up. All right, So it seems like on this tire it says inflate to 36 psi. It doesn't give you a range, it just gives you explicit directions to make it 36. So I'm gonna take off this dang Presta adapter, and that's why I like Schrader's more, is you don't have to fuss around with all those adapters. And you also don't have to be a bike snob. Alright guys, so at this point we're gonna want to take all this hardware off of the axles. So we've got the nut, and we've got like this flat washer in there, and then we've got this other nut, or it's not a nut, it's like a, this is like a anti-rotational, it's kind of like a torque arm washer, right? It's a tabbed anti-rotational torque washer kind of thing. So we got to take these off both sides. So that we clear everything off of our axles here. Alright, so now we got to put the brake rotor onto the motor. So this is just a 6-bolt brake rotor. So I'm going to go, I think I'm going to get a 203. Like this motor, depending on how big your, like how bulky and the physical size of your brake caliper, like you might not be able to fit a 160 or a 180 on this. And it's also kind of like, I think that with hub motors, like it always just seems to work better when you have a big rotor on it. So I'm gonna get my 203 that I have laying around somewhere and put it on here. So a good tip is that when you have an e-bike motor, like you really want to make sure that the bolts are secure on the brake rotor, because if these bolts start coming loose, the brake rotor and the bolts are moving, but this motor cable right here is not moving. And if one of these bolts is coming out and it can touch this cable, like it'll just totally shred your motor cable, and that is a nightmare. If your brake rotor bolt comes out, shreds this cable, then you have a nightmare on your hands, and like a big motor repair job for like a $10 or $20 cable. So just take care of your cable. Don't let your brake rotor bolts become loose and start fraying your motor cable. Alright guys, so this is the part where we gotta see if this motor is gonna fit in our dropouts. So this is a M14 axle, but the flats on it are 10, what does that say? 10.1 millimeters? So it should be like 10 millimeter flats. And then if we come and we look up at my dropouts, they're hopefully, so it says 10, what is this, 10.5 or something. So motor has a M14 axle, 10 millimeter flats. It should just fit right up in here. The axle should just fit up into the dropouts, and if it doesn't, like you can just use a minor amount of filing with like a round file up in the dropouts to get the motor to slide in there. So let's get this motor into the dropouts, shall we? Alright guys, so I've got a Micro-Shift Acolyte CS-H083, 12 tooth to 42 tooth range. It's got 8 speeds. Finish is ED black. Spider, no. Aluminum cog, no. Cassette body, standard. So this is the cassette that I'm going to put on here, because I had a Micro-Shift 8-speed cassette laying around that I bought a while ago. I still have it, I never used it, so we might as well. Alright, so we've got this bulb right here, the shiny cassette itself. It's got like a little thing on there, little thing in the middle. And then so this thing is riveted together. I was originally going to take this thing apart and try and use it with a mid-drive, but I couldn't take it apart. But for this hub motor, it should work excellently. Let's flip this wheel around. The wheel has got significantly heavier now that it has a motor in it. Alright, so what we're gonna do here is I'm gonna put a little bit of grease on my free hub body thing. Is this 8-speed cassette just made to be the right size here? Will it fill up the whole thing, or do we need a spacer? I don't know. Seems like this should fit once I get this last little piece on there. For this little bulb, I'm gonna put a little bit of grease on the cassette lock ring. Okay, so now, like I was saying before, like if you try and use the cassette tool that came with this kit, it's too small to fit over the axle of this motor. See? So you might run into that problem with this cassette tool that is included with this motor kit. But fortunately, I've got a couple other ones that work. And what seems to work is freewheel tools. Like if you've ever used a freewheel tool, I have a couple of them here. This one is a Park Tool FR 1.3. And then I have another one here that I got on Amazon at some point. It says DNP. But these are both freewheel tools with like the kind of like the same splines. And these ones have a bigger hole that actually fits over this. Right? Excellent. So then now I just gotta find a wrench, and we'll get the cassette lock rings finalized here. All right. So that should be good. So now we've got the micro shift cassette on there. And our wheel is looking good. Now we just gotta start fitting this thing onto the bike. See how it fits. Will it fit into the dropouts, or are we gonna have to file it? I don't know, let's find out. One other thing is that it's gonna be easier to fit this wheel on here and see how the motor fits if I just take this derailleur off quick. So I'm gonna disconnect the derailleur as we're fitting this motor on, and then I'll just put the derailleur back on once the motor's on there. So there we go, get that out of the way. All right. Now the brake caliper I'm going to leave on there. I'm going to take out the bleed block, or else the rotor won't be able to go up in there and you won't be able to get the wheel on here. But I'm going to leave the brake rotor on there because I use some random brake mount adapters that were laying around, and I'm hoping that it's going to make my 203mm rotor fit this caliper. We're going to have to see. But that's why I'm going to leave the caliper on here while we're fitting the motor. And then I'm just going to pull out this bleed blocker thing, get that out of there. Now don't hit the brakes while this thing is out of there. All right, so now it's time to fit the motor on the bike. All right guys, so what you're gonna want to do is like look down at the axles, and so you want the axle flats, like the flat part of the axles, to be aiming kind of like upwards, right? So that the narrow part, the flats, can go fit up inside of the dropouts on your bike. And then also, I have the motor cable oriented. It comes out the side of the axle. I have the motor cable oriented so it's going towards the front of the bike. Like otherwise, if it was coming out the back of it, like you'd have to like loop it around and it would be all weird. So just make sure that the axle is kind of like oriented so that it can go in the dropouts. And make sure that the motor cable is going in the right direction towards the front of the bike. And then what I'm going to do here is, this is always kind of it's kind of tricky sometimes. Like The motor wheel is pretty heavy. You can try lifting it up into the dropouts when it's in your stand, but like when you're first fitting a hub motor and first getting the axles to go into the dropout, sometimes it's a little bit tight, and it works a little bit better if you just have the wheel on the ground and then you can just drop the bike down on top of the axles. And so it's a lot easier if your derailleur isn't on here. I've got that bleed blocker out of the brake caliper. So, I mean, basically what we're going to do here is I'm going to get my wheel kind of like into a position where it's going to be good. And then I'm going to start loosening up my bike stand, and it's currently holding onto the bike by the top tube. Straighten out the wheel a little bit. And basically, I'm just gonna lift the bike like out of the bike stand, and then just lower it, just carefully like lower it down. Just lower it down onto the rest of everything. Maybe I can lift it up a little bit. Okay, so it's hard to show what's going on, and it's hard to even like do this at all. So sorry about the bad camera angle. I'm gonna put those flat washers on the axles, and then I'm gonna grab all of this stuff, this hardware, and just put it in my pocket so that I have it. Because once I have my hands full here, like it's hard to go like walk across the garage to go get different pieces. All right. So I'm able to flip your bike upside down and do this too, if you don't have a bike stand. So now that I've got those little flat washers on there, we're gonna drop the axles down. Make sure that the brake rotor is going into the brake. Oh, it's always so hard to do this. Nice. I think we got it. Okay, so the main thing now is we don't want it to fall out before we get the axle nuts on there. So let's see. Oh. So I'm looking to see if my brake, let's see here, is this brake mount gonna work? Looks close. Looks like it should be good for now. And sometimes, like if the axle isn't going all the way up into the dropouts, you can file it a little bit. But this one is like 99% up in the dropouts, so that should be good. You maybe just like sit on the bike a little bit, put some weight on it, and make sure that oh man, my rear shock has no air in it. It feels kind of smooth even with no air in it. That's crazy. But I think now that we've put a little weight on this bulb, we should be able to put the nuts on there. Man, that shock feels good. I've never had a good shock like that before. I'm excited to try this bike out. All right, so I'm gonna get the axle nuts on there now, and I don't even know where my wrench is that I used to do that. All right, so from the outside, I'm putting on this guy, this tabbed anti-rotational washer, and you want the tab going towards the inside, like into the dropouts, and then that kind of grabs inside of the dropouts, and it prevents the axle from rotating in the dropouts, which is not good. So we want to put these on first, and then we put the big axle nut on here. Maybe grease it up a little bit. Let's see here. Get some grease on the threads for good measures and good torque. Same thing on the opposite side. Get the tabbed anti-rotational washer going on to the axle. Make sure that it's down in the dropout all the way. Tabbed anti-rotational thing right there. I think it might be, I'm not sure, like, you know this little like washer, this that flat washer that came with the kit? Like I found, like I put that on the inside because I found that like this part where the motor and that jam nut on the axle, when you clamp it into the frame, like it was actually like chewing some of my frames up. And I just feel a little bit better when there's that flat washer on the inside in between that jam nut and then the rest of the frame. So I don't know if that's the right way to do it, but that's how I do it. And so I mean, this motor is made with a little bit of, like it's made for 138 millimeter dropouts to 141 or something like that. So like there's a little bit of wiggle room with how you put it together. So you might have to, you might not, like if you have a 138 millimeter dropout, like you might not even be able to fit that little flat washer in there. It just might be too tight and too hard to get in there. But on this one, it's 141 quick release. So I think by adding this washer in there, it probably fills in like, you know, 39, 40, like these washers are probably like 1.5 millimeters thick or something. So I think that by adding these flat washers on the inside of the dropout, it kind of makes up for this being a 141 quick release, like boost quick release instead of a 138. I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you would do with those little flat washers. I gotta find my wrench. All right guys, nice, I found it. So what I use is I use a 21 millimeter socket. And then we're just gonna come in here, tighten these axle nuts on there. And go around the other side, tighten this one in there. So then when you tighten your motor wheel on your bike, like you kind of want to like tighten it to the same tightness every time and have a pretty consistent way that you do it. If you don't have a torque arm on this motor, like these nuts, they do slowly kind of like wiggle loose, and you just need to be aware of that. It seems like I might have to space out like my rear brake mount adapter a little bit too with some of those little washer things like I did on my other bike, because it seems like the brake rotor is a little bit more this way, like a millimeter, like 2 millimeters, like shifted like this way. I think it's actually, it might be because I put that little flat washer down in there. So all right guys, so you're gonna have to make your own decision about like whether to put that little flat washer on the inside or the outside. I put it on the inside. It's a little bit more difficult to put it on the inside. I think if you put these flat washers on the inside, it can mess, like you might have to re-index your derailleur. And I think I actually like have to space out my brake a little bit and like with some washers to move it this way. Just slightly to make up for that little flat washer that I put in here. But what I found on my other bike was when I didn't have this flat washer in here, like the inside of my dropout was getting like mangled and like damaged because the motor wasn't pressing. Like it's kind of a weird thing where the motor presses into the dropouts. Like I prefer to have that little flat washer in there on the inside. Is my personal preference after using this motor for about a year. But you'll have to just experiment and see what works best on your bike, because it might be different. So let's get the Micro-Shift Acolyte back on here so that I can get like the chain and all of my gears and everything, and my shifter and all those kind of things working. Derailleur on there. Let's get the cable going through there. There we go. Nice. And then I'm gonna have to get a chain. 8-speed chain of some kind. I actually don't even have a crank arm on here right now. I guess for now I'm just gonna use the crank arm that came with the bike. And it's kind of like, it's like a narrow wide-ish, but it's not actually narrow wide. Actually, it doesn't seem, well, it does seem like some of these, it does seem like it's like half narrow wide, but it's not actually narrow wide. Like this thing really sucks, but I am going to use this just until I get a different crank set, which I haven't done yet. And this is like all full of oil from the chain that came on the bike. So I'm gonna put a wax chain on it so it's not getting me all messy all the time. All right, so let's put this crank on here and we'll put it going upwards. There we go. So we got the crank started. I'll get the crank bolt. That crank bolt going in there, and then that was that's like a big 8 or something. Pretty good. I didn't put the pedal assist sensor on there. It seems like there might be room for it, but I don't like those pedal assist sensors that are a cadence sensor. So interesting. So the shift cable, it does clear the chain ring, but it seems like if the rear suspension was moving around, that'd be, I don't know. We might have to zip tie that like they had it. It's kind of a weird thing. But yeah, so we got the crank back on here. We got the derailleur back on here. Now we got to get a chain on here. So let's see. So I think I'm going to use this chain that I had on the Schwinn AXUM Comp X that already has a bunch of wax on it. And it'll get my fingers like a little bit dirty, but it's a lot easier to get off. It's just black because it's got molybdenum powder mixed into the wax. Okay, so I wonder if this chain's gonna be long enough for shifting through all of my gears. Should be. Chain hanging there for now, and then I'm gonna go up to the shifter and make sure that the shifter is in 9th gear. Because 9th gear is where we want it. And then I want to pull the shift cable all the way here and make sure that the shift cable up at the shifter isn't like caught up on anything. Make sure that the cable housing is going all the way up into the shifter, and I can see from here that it is. And then I'm just going to tighten this thing on there. Shift cable going in there properly. There you go. Nice and tight. Okay. All right, so there we go with that. And now I gotta find my chain breaker. I think I have it right here. Okay, so let's get the camera down, up towards the bike so that, for Brett Woods, Brett doesn't, whoa, Brett doesn't like looking at my lap in my videos. Neither do I, but so what can sometimes make it easier to connect the chain is just like drop it off of the front chainring so that it hangs down like this, and then we can just easily, without the tension of the derailleur, get this thing back together. Oops. There we go, and then we'll just join this chain back up. The chain is just for your human pedaling power, and the motor doesn't use the chain at all, so when you have a hub motor, you can kind of get away with like a cheaper drivetrain and like a lower end. You don't really need as good of a drivetrain with a hub motor. So now it actually seems like this chain is too long. It's just like hanging down way too much. So I think when I originally, I lengthened this chain so that it would fit that goofy chain ring on the TS-DZ8, where it has like it's a mid-drive motor that has a 44 tooth chain ring on the front. So I think I made this chain longer, and then so what I'm gonna do here, I gotta break this and then take a couple links off of it. Alright, so I took a little bit of this chain off because I think I lengthened that previously. So now I'm just going to join this chain back together and get this sorted out here. I did have to revisit my brake, my rear brake mounting thing when I changed it to this 203 rotor. The thing that came on the bike, so it says it's for front 180, it's for rear 160. But then I put this thing on there so it would fit the 203, so that's a 180 adapter right here, and then this is like a rear 140. So kind of weird the way that I've just like taken a bunch of pieces and just figured out what fit, and that was basically it. And then so I'm putting these little flat washers. What are these? Let's see here. They're M6 flat washers, 12 millimeter outer diameter. So since I put that little flat washer in here, this thing right there, it kind of spaced out the brake rotor from the brake caliper a little bit. So I'm going to put this little spacer in between this brake adapter just to space out the whole brake caliper a little bit. So then let's get... Alright guys, so I'm adding 2 of these little flat washer spacers in between to kind of like space out my brake mount a little bit more, because for some reason when I put this motor on these bikes, like it's always like a little bit funky, and like you kind of have to like fix some spacing issues. I think it's gonna be okay though. This is what I did on my other bike. So I've got 2 of those little flat washer, the 6 mil by the 12 mil outer diameter. So 2 of those in between there to kind of move the brake caliper this way a little bit. Alright, so here's the brakes. We got those little funny spacers in there I was talking about, but it seems like the brake, it seems like the wheel can spin nicely now, and it seems like the brake is lining up with the rotor a little bit better. So I've got the 2 mounting bolts for the caliper just slightly loose so that the caliper can still wiggle around. And then I'm gonna hit the rear brake to center the caliper, and then I'm going to tighten these on there. Seems like I might have scratched up, or I might have bent like one part of my rotor, but happens sometimes. We'll sort it out when we start riding. Alright, so it seems like now the brakes are all mounted nicely. Nothing is scraping. We're just gonna finalize that, make sure that's on there all the way, because brakes are kind of like, you might think that the motor is a thing on your bike that is like doing the most force, but it's actually like the brakes. The braking forces are by far the most powerful that are on a bike when you're riding it. Alright, so if you're spinning the wheel, make sure that that motor cable down there is out of the way. I just pulled it out like this, and I'm probably going to route it on top of my chainstay, because this thing, it pivots upwards down here, and so if I had this motor cable if I had the motor cable attached to the bottom of the chainstay, I might do that. I don't know yet, but like basically, like when this whole thing is pivoting right here, the full suspension, this whole part can spin this way, and you don't want the motor wire to get like yoinked when the suspension is going around. So let's make sure this motor cable is out of the way right now while we're spinning the wheel and stuff. You probably have to get it out of the way to even like get the wheel to go up into the dropouts in the frame and stuff. So, but yeah, so now we can actually pedal, but we've got to adjust the derailleur. So we'll do that next. Get the gears and the indexing and all of that, the limit screw set. Alright, so I'm back with a normal, or no, we don't even need a screwdriver for the Acolyte. It looks like it uses like a 2 or 3 mil Allen. Huh. Let's see here. Was it 3? Yeah. Okay. So now I need to be able to see which one is the high limit and which one is the low limit, and my Acolyte is all dirty and I can't tell. Okay, on the Acolyte, the high limit screw is on the bottom, and then the low limit screw is on the top. So I'm gonna adjust the high limit screw, and I'm gonna start tightening it. And so when you tighten the high limit screw, when you're in the 8th gear, it's gonna move the derailleur this way. And so if I start tightening it, at some point the chain will start clicking, trying to shift up into 7th gear, because so you can hear it. So now I've moved that I've tightened the high limit screw so much that the derailleur has gone this way, and now the chain is actually like trying to go up into this other gear, 7th gear. But so now we just want to loosen the high limit screw until it stops making that noise. There. So there's just like a little tiny airtight gap between the chain and that 7th cog, and then I'm going to go up to the shifter and do an upshift. So we're in 7th gear. And so this is what we need to adjust with this barrel on the shifter, the shift cable adjuster. So we'll adjust this a little bit. And so when you screw this adjuster so that the adjuster is coming out, I think when the adjuster is coming out, it's actually like adding tension to the cable. So I just twisted that a few times. Let's see if this shifts up into 7th. I'm gonna keep spinning the cranks, and I'm gonna keep spinning this barrel adjuster with my other hand until it, there. So shift it up into 7th. See? So now let's see here. 6th, make sure that it shifts. Here we go. So let's go through the gears. fifth, fourth, third, second, and then is the chain going to be long enough to get into first? Should be. And so go up into first. Okay. And then it doesn't even seem like the chain has enough room to fall down in there, like inwards off of the, like if the low limit screw was messed up here, I think that the chain would just touch the motor and it would probably find its way back onto the chain or to the gears. But we will adjust the low limit screw just in case so that everything is dialed. So the low limit screw is on the top on this one, and then so when we tighten the low limit screw, the derailleur is going to come towards us and the chain is going to drop down into the second gear, and then I'm going to loosen the low limit screw until the chain can go back, just until it can go back up into the first gear but no further. So let's tighten it. Okay, so it already jumped off. Oh. So now let's loosen that low limit screw, probably like just as much as I just tightened it, really. All right, so there we go. And then seems like we might have to adjust the B tension screw a little bit here as well. But for now, the e-bike build needs to go on. Like, we can figure out the drivetrain later. For now, just let it be known that derailleur is here. We can shift through most of the gears nicely. The first gear that's a little bit clicky, but it's not a big deal. I probably won't even be able to hear it when I'm riding. And I barely use first gear except for when I'm climbing up the most steep of steep inclines. So it shouldn't be a big problem. I am gonna probably come back and like finalize my drivetrain at a later point when I change the chainring and the cranks and stuff. We're not gonna do that yet. But so now it seems like it's shifting through all the gears and working mostly. Enable that clutch on that thing. Alright. Alright guys, it's coming along. So I've been working on getting my battery on here. And it's looking pretty good. This Powallan 48 volt 20 amp hour battery. So this is 13S 4 parallel in this battery, 20 amp hours. A good amount of range. So it's gonna be nice. I'm not gonna have to bring a battery in my backpack all the time now that I have this battery. So what I did is like I took electrical tape and I put it underneath where the Velcro is gonna go, and so those are all strapped on there. And then I have, I don't know if you can see, but I've got like a zip tie that is, this zip tie is going, okay, so I've got this zip tie that's going around my battery, and then the zip tie is going through this little thing right here that usually like holds on your cables. So this little like cable boss guy, I don't have my dropper post thing right in there yet, but so basically, so this little guy, I've got the zip ties going through there so that the zip ties are cinching the battery upwards towards the frame so that it's not like sliding backwards while I'm riding. And so I just need to, so I've got the zip ties around it. I just need to kind of figure out where I would like the zip tie, the ends of the zip ties to go, so that I don't have like this unsightly situation with zip ties. So I'm just going to keep getting this situated on here with the zip ties, make sure that the battery is getting cinched up towards the front of the bike. Okay, so I shouldn't be able to move too much, and then I'll cut all those zip ties off. Alright, so now we got the battery on the bike. Looking good. I can't wait to ride this thing. Oh my goodness. So the battery has these wires hanging down out of it, and one of them is a charge wire for the charger, and it's kind of a weird deal. So what I'm going to do with this is like, I do like before I just had it tied to my bike right here, but I think that this thing was going like that. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna take one of these little Velcro zip tie things, and I'm gonna tie it onto the charging cable. Very let's see. Maybe like towards the top of it. Get it on there. And then there's like this little Velcro thing on the back, this little plastic like buckle loop thing where there's usually a Velcro strap, but I cut it off of there because I'm not using this Velcro strap on the back. But what I can do here, there's this buckle. I don't know if you can see, there's a buckle. And so I'm gonna use that buckle to just like secure this charging cable in here while I'm riding. And I'm hoping that as I'm riding around, like, I don't want this, I want somewhere for this charge cable to just kind of like hang out with not making any noise and causing problems. Okay. Alright, so now I'm going to take the bike out of the stand here and then sit on it while my shock doesn't have any air in it, because I want to see how this thing is moving and make sure that my shock is not touching the battery at all, and make sure that this charged thing isn't going to be in the way here. So I'm just going to take it out of the stand and then just kind of like gently sit down on it and assess how this thing looks. Alright, so I don't even really need to sit on it. I guess I can just kind of like lean on it and we can evaluate what the shock is doing down there. It seems like the shock it seems like it goes forward maybe like a few millimeters throughout its stroke, but it doesn't go forward much. It's mostly just going down towards the bottom of it. So it seems like it's got plenty of room to clear the battery there. So when I got this bike, the way that they had routed this shift cable was there's like a zip tie here, and then it went down through there, and then it came up, and then it was like right here to cinch this, to cinch the the shift cable like back this way and keep it from going. I think that's to keep it from going in the chain ring. Like when the suspension is moving around, like the cable in some spots will kind of like, you know, it can kind of like move to, depending on how the suspension is moving. So I'm just gonna try and tighten this thing on here so that it's kind of holding that cable back in there a little bit. Kind of weird deal, but that's just how they had it. I don't know. Got a brake rotor scraping, but there we go. So that I did this shift cable just kind of like they did when I got the bike. It's kind of weird. I don't know. What do you think? Let me know in the comments about that. Like, it seems like there should be something welded onto the frame, and that was a little bit of an oversight. But whatever. Zip tie is a pretty easy workaround. I do think that the cable is probably going to scratch things as the suspension's moving around, but whatever, I guess. So I'm trying not to like scratch this thing up and discombobulate it. I have a tendency to do that quite early in the building and or riding process. Alright, so now I've got the FlipSki controller down here, and I have not opened it yet. FlipSki 75100 Pro V2 speed controller. So this is the controller that I'm going to put on here, and what we're going to do right now is we're going to open it up just so that I can get the controller itself out of the box. And then I want to see where I can fit the controller on the bike. I'm not sure if the controller can fit right here in between the seat tube and the shock. It definitely can't go back here on a full suspension bike, because when the suspension goes down, this wheel comes closer, a lot closer to the back of the seat tube right here. So you can't put anything right here on a full suspension bike. But I'm not sure that it'll fit in here. I'm really not sure about that. It might have to like go right here somewhere, and here, I don't know. We got to get this thing out of the box so that we can see where it fits. I'm hoping I don't have to put this thing anywhere too wacky. Like, I want to get it, I would like to get it into the frame somewhere. Otherwise, it's not going to be ideal. But let's just pop this thing open. Wow, it's taped. FlipSki, it seems like they tape their entire boxes. It probably helps keep it waterproof. Alright. So when you buy a FlipSki controller, you get a box. There's a whole bunch of stuff in it. This is the key. So this is a switch that you can use. And it goes up on your handlebars, and there's like a key switch. And then there's a display that shows the voltage. It can be kind of nice. It kind of takes up a lot of room on your bars. And there's a wire that needs to go all the way up your bike to this thing. So, did they start making FlipSkis smaller, or has it just been a while since I saw one? I don't know, I guess that's how big FlipSkis are. It's been a while since I looked at one. It's heavier than I remember. 75-100 Pro V2 aluminum PCB, that's the one. Alright. So this anti-static bag has the FlipSki and all of the wires and stuff in it. It seems like they put it all in one bag now. I thought it used to come in multiple bags, maybe not. I think it's just been a while since I did a FlipSki. So let's get this FlipSki out of here. And it's going to have a whole bundle of wires, delicate wires that you don't want to break. So I'm just kind of separating some of these things for now. So I'm going to disconnect everything from the FlipSki, but you can see right here at the top left, this little white connector is this ignition switch. So I'm going to disconnect that so that we can get this switch out of my way here. So there's the switch. We got that disconnected from the FlipSki. And then there's all these other things that are connected to the FlipSki. So on the bottom left, this is what needs to connect to your motor. So we'll wire that up at a future point. So we do want to keep this one out. The USB cable right here, if you need to program your FlipSki, but I disconnect that because it has Bluetooth built into it. That's what this thing is. This is a Bluetooth antenna, so don't damage this thing. And then, man, have they always been this big? This seems smaller than I remember. We might be able to fit it in here. Let's get the rest of these wires off. So then there's like this 5-volt ground and servo thing right there. I'm not even sure what that's for. I guess running some kind of a servo. I don't know. And then so this is like the main communication wire right here, where it's got all the ADC, TX, RX, ground, 3.3, 5.5 volt. So we're gonna need that. Basically, these are the two things that are required. Is this one that plugs into here, because your throttle and your brake cutoffs and other stuff like anything that connects to 3.3 volts or 5 volts needs to get wired to that one. And then this one that goes over here, this is what goes to our motor, right? And then, like I said, I'm just going to keep the switch. I'm going to keep the switch out here too, just to show that this is another thing we need to wire. Okay. So, but now I've got the FlipSki, and I'm gonna think a little bit about where I want to put this thing on my bike. So ideally, you kind of want to have it somewhere that is, let's see here. So I wonder, I'm thinking the controller can either go, like, it might be a little bit of a squeeze to get it to go in here like this. Like, it seems like ideally, since the battery leads are right here, and then the motor leads go down this way, like, you kind of want to have it so that it would be ideal to have it oriented like this. If I could get the motor wires to go through underneath there, those phase wires, like the shift cable is kind of in there also, but yeah, then there's some cables over there that are kind of in the way of doing that, of getting that flush. Ideally, you want this thing like, man, it might be tricky to get this onto this bike. I don't know where exactly I'm gonna do this. Weird, I'm gonna have to think about this. All right, guys, so it's been a few days, but I'm getting back at it here with the Schwinn AXUM FS e-bike build. So we got the whole like motor wheel mounted on here, and the motor cable is coming up the chainstay over there on the non-drive side. It's just kind of hanging there. It's not connected to a controller yet. And the battery is on here. It's a Powallan 48 volt 20 amp hour triangle battery. If you go to powallan-e.com and then try using code EBIKEBUILDER50, all capital letters, if they have any 48 volt 20 amp hour batteries left, you can get $50 off of this thing, and I think it's less than $300 for this. Like, it's closer to $200 than $300, I think. So for this triangle battery, I think it's like $250 or maybe even less with my code. But so that's 20 amp hours of 48 volts. It's a good amount. So this thing, it just needs the controller now. That's all it needs. That's the controller, is what connects to the battery and connects to the motor and delivers the power from the battery to the motor. So now we've got to connect the controller to this bike. And so if you bought the motor kit, what you're generally going to do is you're going to use the controller that came with the kit, right? So this is going to be the easiest thing that you can do. And I already showed you this when we opened up the motor kit, but inside of this convenient controller case, this is the controller that came with the motor kit, right? I can't tell if it's potted. It doesn't appear to be potted in there. It seems like it's sealed around the edges, but it doesn't seem like it's fully potted in there. Looks like it's waterproof around the edge though. But so this is the controller that comes with the kit. And I think this one does like 21 or 22 amps. What does it say on this thing? So it says 48 volts under voltage, 39 plus 1 volt, motor phase angle 120, current limiting 25 plus or minus 1 amp, date 2024-10. So this is the controller that came with my kit. It says 25 plus or minus an amp, but it's actually like, I would say like 21 or 22 amps is what this motor uses. But so this is the controller, but you can always hook your motor up. This is kind of like the easy way, right? It's just to use the controller that came with the kit, right? And so it's got all the wires and the connectors on it, and they're very easy to plug together. Like, to hook this motor to hook the motor to this controller, we just use this thing, right? Like, this is how we hook this controller to the motor, right? So we've got that other connector right here that's coming from the motor on the opposite side there. and you connect this into it. So that would connect the controller to the motor, right? And then this thing, it has a pedal assist sensor if you want to use that. We already talked about that. I don't really use those kind of pedal assist sensors, the cadence ones, because I think they're a little bit dangerous, and I always accidentally shoot my bike across the garage on accident when I'm not actually riding it. So use these pedal assist sensors at your own risk. It's just kind of a cheap, inexpensive, simple version of pedal assist, but it can be a little bit dangerous if you're not careful or if you're clumsy like I am. All right, so then the next connection that we've got here, this goes to the 1T4. This is like the display harness, so this is what connects up to your display and your throttle and your brake cutoffs and all of that. And then there's the thing on here, this JST 2-pin is for a light, for the headlight. And then this is what connects to the battery. Red is the positive, black is the negative. So this is like a Anderson connector. These guys are called Anderson connectors. It looks like they're heat shrinked here, so they're kind of held together. They also clip together, these plastic connectors. But so if you bought this kit, like this would easily hook up to the battery, right? This Anderson connector, it would easily hook up to the battery right here. I've got an extra extension, like adapter cable on the end of my battery that changes it from this Anderson over to an XT90. And so what I'm gonna do here is we're gonna connect the motor and the battery to a controller, but I'm actually not gonna use this controller, okay? Because this one, it's a little bit bigger. Like, let's see here. I don't know if there's anywhere where this thing would fit on here very well. And I also like to use VESC controllers. So this right here is a FLIPSKY 75100 Pro V2 controller. So this is a VESC controller. So there's a little bit more wiring that you have to do here, because all these, the phase wires and the battery wires and like all of these little, like your motor connections and your throttle connections and stuff, like it's a little bit more advanced to wire this thing. But I think, like, I've been doing it for like the past year or so. I've been using these FlipSki controllers, and I like how small they are, and they just have worked really well for me at a very affordable price. And you can use, like, the thing about this is you can use this controller. This is basically only made for this motor, right? It came with this motor, and the controller is basically designed specifically for the motor that we have. But this FlipSki one with VESC, you can basically automatically train this controller to learn any kind of, like, any motor with a little bit of configuration and know-how on your part. So I would say if this is like your first time building an e-bike and you're trying to follow along, what I would recommend doing first is just you get used to using the normal stock controller. Okay, I would hook this thing up and use it as intended, because you don't have to do a bunch of advanced wiring and stuff. Like, this thing should just go onto your bike and then plug into the motor, plug into the battery, plug into the wiring harness, plug in your lights and all that stuff. Pedal assist if you want. And so you won't have to wire anything with this thing, right? Like, you're not gonna have to do any soldering or make any wire connections. It's a very simple way where you just plug everything in and you can get going. However, it is a little bit bigger. It's I would say it's like slightly bigger in terms of like what you've got to fit on your bike. And it's a little bit unsightly. These things, these yellow ones, like, you could paint it black or something if you wanted. It might not help with, this is metal because it helps it cool down, right? The outside of these. So you want this against your bike frame somewhere, like these controllers. You want to mount it against the metal on your bike frame so that it can transfer heat from the controller into the bike, and the bike will absorb a lot of the heat from the controller. So yeah, if it's your first time, I would use this, okay? Like, and you're not gonna have to do any soldering. You just figure out a spot on your bike for it, plug everything in, and you should be able to go. And you'd have to, in that case, you would use the display that came with the kit. All right, but like I've already done videos where I think I did, in my original Bafang G900 video, I did one, I tried out this controller first. I think on my Ledge X2 I also used this controller first. So I've done 2 videos already with this motor, the Bafang G0900, where I used the stock controller and tried it out first. And I'm an advanced e-bike builder. Alright, so I wanna get this bike on VESC. Like, I just wanna put in a little bit of extra effort up front to get this bike onto VESC, so that I can make my videos on YouTube with that cool like overlay HUD thing where you can see all the stats in real time as I'm riding. That's a feature of VESC, and the VESC tool app that comes on as part of the VESC platform. So there's just a lot of cool features of this thing. So after a while, if you buy this motor kit, maybe consider upgrading to a FLIPSKY. I'll show you how to wire up this FLIPSKY right now. We're gonna wire up a FLIPSKY. And so how this thing works is like, so on this controller, the stock one, this is the cable that goes to the motor, and you can see inside of here there's like three big golden holes where there's like bigger phase wires, right? So those 3 holes are the phase wires between the motor and the controller. And so right here, these 3 wires are the phase wires of the FLIPSKY, right? So like basically we gotta wire this FLIPSKY and solder it and put some kind of different connectors on it. And we gotta connect it to our motor, which has a connector like this, right? And there's also some little, if you look closely, there's 3 little holes right here. There's 3 little holes right here, and then there's 2 holes over here. So all those little tiny holes are signals. So they don't actually carry a lot of current like the phase wires do, but the signal wires are sending signals back and forth between the motor and the controller. So it's like your Hall sensors, it's gonna send as a signal through here, right? And then there's also a speed sensor inside of the motor. There's a circuit board on the stator that stays stationary and it does not move. And then on the inside of the motor, there's a magnet that spins around with the wheel and like the outer casing of the motor. So that magnet spinning inside of the motor is actually like a speed signal. And every time the motor, there's like 6 magnets inside of the motor that spin around in a circle that do pulses. So the controller knows that every 6 pulses from that sensor, the speed sensor inside the motor, it knows, they can calculate your speed based on that speed signal. So that's one of the other signals that comes through this motor connector cable. So again, when you're using the stock controller, like you just plug this thing in and it's not hard at all, right? But so what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna cut this motor cable. Like, look how long this is. Look at how much we got here. So I'm gonna cut this thing. Like, I'm gonna figure out where we want to put this FLIPSKY on the bike, right? And then we're gonna use this end of it right here, and I'm gonna connect this to the motor because it has this nice waterproof connector that can go on your chainstay over here, and it'll look pretty clean. You're not gonna have like 10 different wires going between the motor and the controller. You just want this one big cable that has all of these little individual wires inside of it. So this is the cleanest way to connect the motor to the controller, is a connector like this. But instead of using it with this controller, I'm gonna chop this thing off, this cable, and I'm gonna use the motor cable, and then I'll cut some of the insulation, and we'll split all of the individual wires of this motor cable so that we can wire each of these individual wires and then connect them to the FlipSki controller instead. Okay, so most of the wiring will still be the same between the motor and the controller. Like, it's just going to be this thing running along the bike. Like, since there's full suspension on this bike, like, you don't want to have a bunch of like fragile tiny wires, like 10 wires all going along your chainstay in between the motor and the controller. You want one of these guys that's kind of like insulated and protected and stuff. So how I usually do this is we get a cable cutters, and then we just, so I've already kind of decided that where I want to put my FlipSki is going to be probably like right here on the bike. I'm going to zip tie it to the seat tube, and it's just going to be kind of like right here, like this is probably how I'm going to do it. I had considered doing it right here, like on my other bike I had it right here. But one thing about having it right here is I'm always drinking my water and then I almost accidentally spill it, like it's dribbling out of my mouth, or like my iced coffees. And like for some reason when I have the FlipSki here, like I always like accidentally dribble on it when I'm drinking things. And there's also like all these little cable clips and stuff right here, and I kind of want to keep this bike clean and like just have the cables come down as intended. And this thing can also do a dropper cable right here. So, and I already kind of tested it, and I can still get the dropper cable. I can still get the dropper cable going in here around the FlipSki. Like it's, I think the dropper and the FlipSki can coexist peacefully. So, and then, so up here on the FlipSki, these go to the battery, right? So basically, like what I'm going to do is I'm going to solder an XT90 connector onto the end of these two red and black wires. And then the XT90 is going to plug in like to the battery like this, right? And that's how the FlipSki is going to connect to the battery, is it'll have a yellow connector, XT90, kind of like this, and plug in there like that. And I think I'm just going to have this wire go up like this and be kind of, because this battery, it's got this like charge wire thing hanging out of two, and I usually just strap it to the back of the battery and just kind of holds there. So I think I'm going to have the power leads going up here through like this, and then there's actually like this hole in the shock, like in here in the shock, and it's gonna be kind of weird because the shock is gonna have the battery cable, like this shock pivot point right here is gonna have the battery cable going through it, but this piece just kind of like goes like this a little bit, and like it's not a big issue. And there's a hole right here where, like, you know, like it's not a big deal. So I think that the FlipSki can go here. The battery power leads can just kind of come up, like this thing can just kind of go in here and connect to the FlipSki, and it's not going to be an issue with the suspension moving around. Like I think so we're gonna need to do a bunch of things to connect this FlipSki. Okay, and it does, I kind of already unboxed it. It comes with a, I don't know if I got any of this on video yet, but the FlipSki, it comes with a wiring diagram right here. And basically the things that we're concerned with are, you gotta plug in a key, so some kind of like a switch that turns the FlipSki on and off. So that's this thing. And if we look on the wiring diagram right here, you can see there's a little key switch, and then it plugs into that top left spot on the FlipSki. So you basically plug this little guy, this key, in here on the FlipSki, and it's kind of
this connector that kind of clips in there. It's a really small connector. But so the key goes in there like this, the ignition key. When we get to that point, right? Like you want to put the key on there like last, basically. So we'll do that at a later point. I'm just showing you the connections on the controller that we need to make here. So the next connection that we're going to have to make is you have to connect. So I already talked about how you have to connect these 3 phase wires on the FlipSki to the motor. But then remember how there's all those other signals that I was talking about that are inside of this motor connector? Those little guys. So there's this wire right here that came with the FlipSki, and it's got 6 wires in it. So there's black, green, orange, blue, white, and red. And so this is the other cable, the other wires that need to connect to your motor. And so they plug in here on the FlipSki. And then, so we're basically going to have to make all of these wires right here. So the 3-phase wires and then these wires, they all need to connect to this thing. Right, so I'll show you how we can connect these. I'm basically going to cut this. I'm going to cut this wire off of this controller right here. All right, sorry, camera keeps cutting out, but we need to connect the FlipSki to the controller. So that's what we're going to do here. So yeah, like the motor, all of these wires, I'm going to connect to this thing. We're cutting this thing off of here right now. Let's cut this fucker off of here. It might spark. If you've already connected this controller to a battery and used it, like the capacitor inside of it might be charged up. And so it might like have a voltage still inside of a capacitor, and when you're cutting this cable it might spark a little bit. So I don't know, I would like, you need a proper cable cutters, like something that can cut through some metal here, like stranded copper wires and stuff. And so by cutting this cable off the controller, obviously like you're not really going to be able to use it anymore, this old one. But if you leave, like if you leave some of the motor cable, some of the end of the length of the motor cable on there, you could use it in the future, but you would just have to like rewire it up to a motor cable. And so there's quite a bit of length on this motor cable. Like look how long this thing is. I'm not gonna need, because it needs to connect right here, and then the controller is gonna be right here. But I want this cable to kind of come along the chainstay, and then it might have to like do a small little like loop or something right here to connect to the FlipSki. Like we're gonna have to size this. We're gonna have to get the FlipSki like in place, zip tied on here, and then I'm gonna have to connect this end into it, like to connect this end into the motor, and then we'll just kind of measure how long of a cable we need to get it to the controller. And so this rear suspension can also like move around a little bit, so we gotta keep that in mind when we're wiring this motor cable. Like the motor cable is gonna have to be able to like move with the rear suspension, and then the FlipSki is gonna be stationary right here. So it's gotta be able, that motor cable is probably gonna have to be attached to the chainstay somewhere so that it's out of the way and it moves along with the suspension properly. All right, so for now, like I'm just gonna cut, like this is the motor cable right here. Is what I'm gonna cut this off of this controller because we're gonna need this. And I'm gonna cut it like down here, and hopefully it doesn't spark. We'll have to see. You want to watch out for sparks from right here. Yeah. Like if anything shorts out right here, there could be sparks. So I'm gonna close my eyes. Okay. There were no sparks, nothing shorted out, because I haven't connected this controller to a battery, right? So if you've already used your controller, I would let it sit or something for a while, like a day or something, before you try cutting it. Or else you gotta discharge the capacitor in it, or you might short out these when you're cutting them, and you could damage your cable cutters a little bit like I have. But all right, so we cut this wire. We're gonna need that. We got plenty of length, and so we've got our FlipSki down here. I'm gonna disconnect this. So what I'm gonna do here before we get into the intricate wiring is I'm gonna wire an XT90 onto the top of this thing. So it's gonna be an XT90 male connector that plugs into the battery, and it plugs into this female one. So this one has the holes in it, the XT90 female. So I'm gonna go find an XT90 male connector, and that's what's gonna go onto the FlipSki on this red and black wire. So as long as I'm cutting off cables off of this controller, another one that I'm gonna cut off here, I'm gonna cut off this cable that looks like this that would connect to the wiring harness, because we're gonna run our throttle and our brake cutoffs through this one wiring harness. And so if we wanna, so I'm gonna use the wiring harness that came with the kit, right? Like I'm gonna use the wiring harness that came with this kit. I'm not gonna change this at all. We're gonna leave all these connectors the same because they're all nice waterproof connectors. And I'm not gonna cut this piece off of this. I want this to be just like this. We're not going to modify the wiring harness. It's still going to be able to disconnect from the controller with this thing. But, so what we're going to want is this piece that it connects to, and then we'll cut this thing off, and we can wire this, we can cut this and then split all the individual wires off, and then we'll wire this piece right here to the FlipSki. And then we'll be able to disconnect the FlipSki from the wiring harness with this thing. Another reason that I want to use this piece down by the FlipSki is this gives us a little bit of extra length on this wiring harness. And what I found is that this wiring harness that comes in this kit, like I almost wish it was just like slightly longer. And so the way that I can make this wiring harness longer is like this piece connects into this piece, so then this gives me some extra length here at the controller. So I'm just going to cut that off of here too, and I'm going to use this when we're wiring the wiring harness to. Okay, I think that's all that I'm going to use from the controller that came with the kit. And by the way guys, the reason I'm not using this box, it is pretty nice for waterproofing and like keeping your controller clean and stuff. It's a nice little controller case that was included with the kit, but I don't really have like anywhere on my bike where I can fit this thing because it's a full suspension bike. So like if you're on a hardtail, you'd probably have a little bit more room, but like on this bike you can't put anything right here because the suspension makes the wheel go like that, and like this thing's not going to fit right there, and it's not going to fit right here. So this could even be nice to put the FlipSki controller inside of it. Like the FlipSki would fit in there as well. But we're a little bit constrained with space, so we're just gonna have to like get the FlipSki directly on here in a very space efficient manner. Alright, so here's some XT90s, some AMASS XT90s. AMASS, AMASS is the brand that you want to get. And then so I have the anti-spark, so the female ones that go on the battery have that green anti-spark thing on them, and the male ones that go on the controller are the non-anti-spark, so they're just yellow. And then they have these guys inside of them. The male ones have the big old prong, and then they connect into the holes on the female ones. So I'm just going to take out a male one, and it's got these two pieces, and you solder the wires into these little golden plated bullet kind of things, and then you put this cover back up over it, and then it's just kind of like a nice clean connection for your battery and your controller. So I'm going to use one of these, XT90. And we're going to get the XT90 soldered onto the FLIPSKY first. So let's do that. So the XT90 connector, it's polarized. So there, you can see there's a plus right here, so it's a positive. So that means you'd want to connect the positive red thing to this one. And then over here, this one says negative, so you want the black negative wire to go right here to the side of it. So let's start out with I'm gonna have the negative wire on the top. And then so I have these little like clamping things, these little vicer things, vice clamp. So if we open this one up a little bit, we should be, they're actually tightening that up a little bit. So I got these little clamps on AliExpress and I've never actually used them before, but I think if we clamp this thing and to hold it while I'm soldering it, like that could probably be a good use of these things. So you don't want to clamp it too much where you're crushing the connector, but then, so I think I can just get this thing, like, let's see here, is this moving around now? What's going on? Moving around a little bit so I can clamp it tighter on the bottom a little bit. Oh, there we go. So then I think over here we can just get this thing kind of like where I would want it, and then get this thing clamping that down. See here, I gotta get this lined up a little bit better. Alright, so before I solder anything, I'm gonna get this little yellow, connector, or this little yellow thing going on here this way, actually, is the way we want it to go, so that it'll connect up into the XT60. Alright, so we got these things like this, and then, let's see. I'm gonna take a wire strippers and just strip a little bit more of this insulation off these. It's like that. Because this XT90, like, you can get quite a bit of the wire into that thing down in there. So I've got some solder here. What do they call it? Like rosin core or something, like just solder. And then I've got some soldering paste. And yeah, I've got my Weller Professional 200 and something watts soldering gun. We're gonna go outside and make this happen. Alright, so when everything is said and done and I get the sun out of the camera, we're gonna have this thing soldered on here like this, and then I just gotta use my pliers to carefully get this little protector thing going. Oh, there we go. Didn't even need the pliers. Got it right up on in there. Nice. Alright. So there we go. So we've got that XT90 connected onto the FlipSki. So now we gotta connect the phase wires to a connector. And so what I'm gonna use for this motor, so I mean, you can connect these 3 wires. Basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna ultimately connect these 3 wires to this motor cable, like the big 3 wires that are in this thing right here. There's going to be a yellow, blue, and a green phase wire in here, and we're going to connect the phase wires from this motor cable into the controller like this, and then this thing over here will connect to the motor on the opposite side, right? But I want to be able to disconnect the FlipSki from this wire right here, this harness for our FlipSki. This is going to be like the motor harness for our FlipSki controller. Is what we're going to do, wire onto this thing right here. So then I'm gonna use these other connectors. These, I think they're called MR60s or something, but they're these little 3-prong things, and we're gonna have one of them on here, right here, and then we'll have one of them on here, and we'll be able to connect and disconnect this easily. Okay, so what I want to do first I'll show you the connectors. They're called AMAS MR60. And so you'll get, there's going to be a male one of these, and then there'll be a female one of these as well. So I got 2 males here, gotta find a female in here somewhere. Let's see. Here we go. I only need 2 of these little, so it looks like this is what we are gonna need. And so we've got the male MR60. Oops, that's this one. Male MR60. And then there's a female MR60. For the purposes of soldering, we're gonna plug them together so that we don't accidentally melt the plastic on the thing itself. And so let's see here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put the female MR60 and we're going to put this onto the FLIPSKY like this. We're going to solder this guy on, all these little bubs onto this thing. And then we'll have our 3 phase wires connected to this thing. It's going to be a tight squeeze, but we're going to do it. I don't know if I'm going to do this on camera because this is a little bit of a tricky soldering job. All these wires are going to be really close together when I solder them. So it's going to be very hard to get on film. So I'm just going to go solder these guys, probably not on camera, but they're going to go on there like this. But first, of course, we want to get this thing going on there. And actually what I had to do last time was I had to strip some of the insulation off of this wire, like back a little bit more, so that I could get this thing to go on here, because this thing doesn't go past the wire insulation. So we got to strip more insulation off these phase wires so that we can get this thing going on here. And then I'll also have some heat shrink on here. So then we'll pull this thing back this way, and then we'll pull the heat shrinks back this way. So I got to get some heat shrink wrap first. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start stripping some more of this insulation off these wires. Without actually like snipping any of the wires. Let's see here. So that should be good for that one. And so you want to strip the insulation off, like you want to do these evenly. Like you don't want one to be longer than the other. It's all, you want it all to kind of like line up. So okay, so I stripped some insulation off these phase wires, and so that is going to allow us to do the rest of this connector. I gotta get some heat shrinkers on this thing first, so we're gonna get some heat shrinkers out here that fit. Looks like there's 2 heat shrinkers inside of each other right here. How do you get those out of each other? How does that even happen? Alright, so I'm going to take these pieces of heat shrink and then get them going over each of these phase wires, because we're going to do this heat shrink. Well, let's see here. We got to heat shrink it. there's like an order of operations that we have to follow here to get these all going into this connector. So let's go like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to get these wires coming through this connector like this, and then we're going to solder them onto this guy, this female. Each one of these guys we're going to solder on there, and then we're going to bring this connector back up here like this, and we're going to slide these guys, these heat shrinkers are going to slide back up like this, and then those will shrink down onto the wires, and then we'll have our final thing, if that makes sense. And it'll kind of look like this at the end, except it'll be all insulated and heat shrunk, and it'll have a nice connector on the bottom of our FlipSki. So that's basically like the order of operations. Like you gotta get these little guys on there first so that you can solder this on there and then pull all these things back up, right? So I'm gonna go do that. Might be hard to get it on camera. Alright guys, so I got this thing soldered onto the phase wires. Now we just gotta heat shrink these little heat shrink connectors. So I'm just gonna make sure all those heat shrinkers are all the way down. So we've got our phase wire connector on there. On the FlipSki we've got the XT90 on there. So we've got our fancy connectors on there. So now we've got to wire up the rest of the stuff. Let's keep going with the wiring. Alright, so now that I've soldered these connectors onto the FlipSki and we're kind of like done with wiring and soldering onto this thing, I am going to zip tie this thing onto the bike. Alright guys, so I'm just getting the FlipSki onto the bike where I want it. I did have to loosen up this shock a little bit because I'm going to run these, I'm going to run this phase wire right underneath it, and I couldn't fit the connector underneath the shock, so I had to loosen up the shock so I could move the shock around a little bit, and then I ran the wire underneath it where I want, and then so now I'm gonna get that shock back in place. Alright guys, so remember this motor cable that I chopped off the original controller? So I have it and then I've connected it to the motor. So see, like motor cable right here, chopped it off, and then it's connected right here, and then this is the motor's cable right here. So what I suggest you do is get some of these little Velcro things, little Velcro zip ties, and then put the soft side on the outside so that the hooks of the Velcro are going towards the wire and away from the frame. The soft side of the Velcro will usually be a lot more gentle on your paint job. And what we're going to do here is zip tie this guy onto the motor cable, and then we're going to tie this thing on there and leave it on here. We just want this to stay on our motor cable because we're always going to be using that. And then what you want to do is get this thing, you can slide it back, and let's see here. So I think we're just gonna, so basically you want to tie this motor cable back by the brake rotor so that the cable doesn't make its way towards the brake rotor and they get like chopped up and stuff. So make sure that your motor cable is out of the way of the brake rotor bolts. So I usually get one like right here, and then so the suspension pivots right here. Like this thing can kind of pivot a little bit, but we should be good. And then let's see here. So we're gonna want another one of those Velcro zip ties to tie it on like to the chainstay or something right here. You got to be careful of this metal connector on this. This thing will scratch your chainstay like crazy if you're not careful. So I'm probably gonna like just zip tie it. And then you got to also make sure that this motor connector, like it can't be like over here, or else your crank will hit the motor connector. See? So like you gotta have your motor connector either on top of the chainstay or underneath the chainstay. And since there's a pivot point on my suspension right here, and this whole thing can like pivot around. So I think it's better for me to have this motor cable on the top of the chainstay as opposed to the bottom, or else when this thing pivots, the motor cable, if it was on the bottom of the chainstay, it could get like pinched, I think, right? So I'm gonna get another one of those Velcro zip ties for this thing right here on the chainstays so it doesn't scratch up my chainstays or fall into the wheel or the pedal. Alright guys, so I kind of like dry fit the motor cable over on the chainstay on the opposite side of my bike. It's just gonna run along where the rear brake line goes, and then I think it's gonna kind of come up and it'll have to do some kind of like a zigzag backwards to connect into this connector right here. And then there's also going to be some little tiny wires that are going to have to go all the way back and connect to the controller. So we're going to have a couple connections that we have to make. So I think I'm gonna use the entire length of this motor cable that I cut off of that other controller. We're going to need the whole length of it so that I can have a nice clean run of the cable, and it's going to be good. So I'm gonna get that off here and then solder get all the connectors going on this motor cable so that we can connect the motor cable to the controller. And you just get a sharp knife like a razor, and then just score the outside of it, because there's a whole bunch of wires inside of this and you don't want to damage them. Like, we need all of the length. So we're just going to score it, and then we're going to do a score, like a straight line back from that towards the end, so that we can rip this thing off of here. I'm not sure if you can see what I'm doing. I can barely see what I'm doing, but we're just going to like score this back down the length of it. Of it, I start pressing a little bit harder. Alright, so now I'm going to use my knife to just kind of saw at the end of this so I can get this thing peeling and like started here. Okay. And then you can usually use like your fingernails to just start picking at it. And if you scored it enough, it should just start ripping where you scored it. So you gotta be careful cutting towards yourself. It's always sketchy. I don't recommend that. So let's try and just cut. Oops. Let's put this down on the floor again, and we'll cut it further. Let's see. Another strategy, once you've scored it, is just to grab the insulation with the pliers, and you can kind of just like start really wrenching on it with the pliers, and that will usually rip it along where you scored it. I might have to go back along this and score it a little bit deeper here. And then once this thing actually starts ripping, like it usually just goes, you can usually just rip it all the way down. It's just a matter of getting it started here along the score line. Oh, there we go. And then, so we don't want to rip any of these wires. All these wires in here are important. But yeah, we're just basically coming down along this thing and making sure that we can strip this off. And at some point, you should just be able to get your pliers around it like this and just kind of like go like this and just twist it down all the way along where you scored it like this, and it should just rip it when you can finally twist it. So I think we're almost down to the point where I scored. Let's see here. And then I'll just rip off right there nice and clean where I scored around it. Awesome. Now look at all these. Look at all of our wires that we have. So these are all the wires
that are inside of this motor cable. So I'm probably gonna get a heat shrink. So these phase wires, these thick wires are gonna connect to one thing, and then these other things are gonna connect to another thing. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get the heat shrink, individual heat shrinks around these phase wires as we solder one of those connectors on here. And then on these little tiny wires, we're gonna hook these to a different connector that's gonna plug into the FlipSki. So, but I'm gonna go outside and solder these, get these phase wires soldered onto this connector first, like this, right? So we're gonna connect the phase wires like this. We wanna make sure that we have that this little thing on there as well. And I'm also gonna get some heat shrinks. Actually, we don't need the heat shrinks on here because these phase wires aren't, like, they can go through this thing. All right, so I'm not going to need any heat shrink on here. It's going to be easy to do these phase wires compared to those other ones on the FlipSki. And then we'll do all these little signal wires last, but I'm going to go outside and then I'm going to solder this onto these guys like I did with the other ones. All right, so I got this connector going on here. Now we just gotta like get this thing up and connected here. Let's see, can we get this on there with the... Oh, we didn't even need the pliers, really. Let's see here. Oh, got her on there. All right, nice. So we got our phase wires all connected here to our wiring harness. Now we've got all these little tiny signal wires that we're gonna have to plug into the FlipSki. So we're gonna wire all these up to a little tiny itty bitty connector that's gonna be much smaller. So we'll do that in a moment here. Okay guys, so it's time to finish our little wiring harness that will connect the controller to the motor, right? So we've got the motor connector on the one side of it. We've got this XR60 connector with the 3 phase wires that are soldered to it. And now over here, we need to put a little connector on these guys. So it's going to be a JST. It's actually like one of these things. You see this? This little tiny, like this wire that came with the FlipSki. Remember this thing? And it plugs into the FlipSki right down on the bottom left of it. It's for the motor connection. So if we're looking at the FlipSki wiring diagram, it's this one right here. So it's got the 5-volt temperature, Hall 1, Hall 2, Hall 3, and then ground. So we want to put a little one of those connectors on here, right? Like onto the end of this thing so that I can connect this straight into the FlipSki. Like the FlipSki, it usually comes with this wire that is like pre-made. And then you can just like cut this thing off the end of it and wire your stuff this way. Or you can use this wire if you want one that's like pre-set up. These little things, these little wires, like look at this connector compared to the size of my thumb. So like it's very tiny stuff. You need a micro crimpers to do this, to do these connectors. So depending on if you have micro crimpers or not, like you can use this one that's already done, or else I'm not going to use it. I'm just, because I've already got all these, I've already got these wires right here, and we'll just put a connector on the end of these, and it'll just connect straight into the FlipSki. I have a little heat shrink thing on here as well, because once we put the connector on here, I'll heat shrink this and then it'll be mostly black, and then we'll just have like some little wires coming out the end of it there. Okay, and then so the tool that I am going to use. So first of all, what we need is like these little connectors. See, these are JST GH 1.25 millimeter connector kit. And so we have to get, and so there's different number of pins on these connectors, right? And so for this connector we're gonna need it's 1, 2, 3, so what is it, 6 pins? So we need a 6-pin
JSTGH 1.25 out of this thing. So we're gonna open it up, and then so the 6 pins are the top right, so I'm gonna grab one of those. These little bubs. And then we'll need these little metal things too. Let's see here, where's my choppers? We're gonna need some of these. So we need a connector, and then it's got all these little like metal things. I'm just gonna cut off like 6 or 7 of them. Let's see here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. And those little pieces of metal are what we crimp onto the end of our signal wires, and then we kind of push them into the connector, and it'll kind of snap into the connector and stay there. And so the tool that I'm going to use for this job is, so this tool was provided to me from IWISS, IWISS, IWISS Electric Co. Ltd. So this is a iCrimp micro pin crimper. It says, it's called, the model number is IWS 3220M. And so this is for 32 to 20 gauge wires, like little tiny wires, basically. So we're gonna take our micro crimpers out. And so IWISS provided this to me. And so how we do this is like, we're gonna get one of these little metal things on the end of each one of these wires. And so how you basically, first I need to strip this like colored insulation off the end of each of these wires before we can crimp. So I'm gonna do that first. All right, so I got all these little wires stripped, so now the metal of the wire is exposed, and we can move on to this next step, which I'm not sure that you're ever gonna be able to see on my GoPro, but what I do is I'm basically gonna load, so these are what, 1.25 connector kit. So let's see here. I think we want to use this first thing, and then so I'm going to put one of these little metal things in there and kind of, let's see here. Is this still a good one? Sometimes if these metal things get smushed, like they'll be messed up and they'll be hard to work with. All right, so we're going to get this going in here. And then so for each of these little wires, we have to crimp the wire, crimp this little metal thing onto it. I'm not even sure if you're going to be able to see this. I guess my clothes are black, so maybe you can see this. But we're just going to take this wire and then put it in here. There's a little bit of insulation kind of like in my way here on this thing. So this thing is a little bit of kind of like a delicate procedure, I would say. So like micro crimping. So let's see here. I don't know if we quite need this much wire, but we can cut it off afterwards. So if you put too much wire onto your little crimper thing, like you can always just kind of like cut the extra length of wire off of there. Okay. So I think I'm just gonna try and make this red one work, and we'll have to see. We'll have to see if it works or not. On the end of this red wire. So I gotta do that for each of these. Okay guys, so now that I've used my IWISS micro pin crimper, IWS 3220M, now I'm gonna look at each one of these individual things and just make sure that they all look good. It looks like I've got some extra wires, kind of like the wires were a little bit long on this one. So I'm going to get all those wires kind of aiming in such a way where I can cut them off. We don't want any like extra wires hanging off the bottom of, like, coming out the end of these connectors. So make sure if you use too much, like, kind of like push the wire upwards, and then you can cut it off. Cut off like any extra little pieces of wire, because these little connectors, like, you just want the piece of wire that's crimped into the connector, and then you don't want any like loose strands of wire going around in this thing, in these little signal. Okay. It looks like I forgot to cut this one off there. Let's see. So, did I do all the other ones? Yeah, we got them all? Okay. So, it looks like we got to cut this off the blue one here. Alright. Alright, so now that we've got all these, like the little metal terminal things on the end of the wires, now we can carefully and microscopically plug those things into this thing, but we got to make sure that we follow the FLIPSKY wiring convention for this connector, because this connector plugs into the FLIPSKY in a certain way. And the FLIPSKY, we got to look at the FLIPSKY wiring diagram to see. So it looks like, all right, so here is a finished wiring harness that's going to go from the motor. So this is going to connect to the motor, and then this is going to connect to the phase wires on the FLIPSKY, and then this, which we just finished, is going to connect to like the motor connection on the FLIPSKY. So I've got my wires in there like this. It looks like, if you're looking at it from the top of the FLIPSKY down, it's like the black is the ground. I've got the 3 hulls, and then there's the temperature, and then there's the 5 volt. And so we've got all those wires going into that thing. So now we can hook this to the motor cable over there on the chainstay, and then I'll route this cable along the bike, and then we'll connect the phase wires right here, and then we'll connect this thing into the FLIPSKY, kind of like right there, once we get it all in place. So first I'm going to connect it back here at this motor connector. Let's see here, which way does this? Kind of got to rotate this until it plugs in there, and then plug it in, and then you bring that thing up there and fasten that on there. And then I've got this zip tie right here that's going to keep my motor cable out of the wheel, hopefully. So let's see here. So alright, so you can see I've got the motor cable secured kind of on the chainstay back here, keeping the cable away from the brake rotor. And I've also got it secured right here so that the cable doesn't start falling into the wheel, like inside of the chainstay. I've also kind of put a zip tie on this just to keep it, I've got it kind of slightly loose, but yeah. So then I've got it running along the chainstay, and this thing should be able to move a little bit, like along with the chainstay as this thing rotates. Like there should be a little bit, this thing should be able to move a little bit. I might zip tie that thing onto the chainstay, I'm not exactly sure, just to keep it, I think that should be fine. Then I've got the motor cable hooked on, kind of like where the brake cable is right here, and then it's looping all the way around, and we'll go over the other side. Alright guys, I'm starting to get a little bit excited here, because it's really starting to come together. Look at this now. Wow, look at all that's going on in there. Wow, we got the FLIPSKY squeezed into the little tiny spot. We've got all these crazy wires going on here, so I've got the ignition switch that's hidden right in here. And so we've got all these wires set up, except there's one thing that we have left to do, and so that's the wiring harness that's going to go up to our throttle and the brake cutoffs. And so like I said before, I'm not going to modify the wiring harness that came with the motor kit at all, but we all remember how we chopped this piece of wire off of the controller. So this is the piece of thing, this is like the connector on the controller where you plug the wiring harness into, and I chopped it off of there. right? So that got all chopped off of there. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna wire this thing, and then this will connect into the controller, so it'll send the throttle signal and the brake signal and stuff like that. The 3.3 volt and the ground up to the throttle and the brakes. And we'll plug it in like this right here, right? So we'll just plug this in as intended. Right, so now we've got this one big wiring harness. We've got we're not going to use this green one, that's for like a display. But then we might, maybe in the future, we could wire that up to a display, but not today. So the one thing we are going to use, possibly, so this is the throttle, right? And then these are the brakes. So this wiring harness, let's see here. So I want to establish how long is this thing going to be. So if it's wired into the controller, right there, and it'll probably be hooked on here by this motor cable. And then, so this thing will probably be like sitting on the frame like this or something. Right here. And then it'll be running up the bike, kind of like underneath the battery probably. I'll have to move the battery slightly to get this kind of like going along that. Or we could even just put it like along the side here. It doesn't even really matter. I don't need to put it under the battery. But then, so let's see here. I gotta hold it in place and keep it where it's gonna be. And so let's see. It'll probably come up the down tube. So let's hold it like right here. And then, yeah, that should be perfect. So that should be a good length. Probably similar to like what my dropper cable would be if I had a dropper on here. So I do think that with this motor kit, like, it's going to be nice to be able to unplug this thing here. And this thing also, this little bit right here that I cut off the controller, like I said earlier, it gives me a little bit extra length. And so I found on my other bike that's a similar size, like the wiring harness was kind of short. So this time I'm going to do this. You want to use that extra little bit from the controller, and then we can always pop it, disconnect it here easily from the controller. And so this guy, this is another situation here. This is the end of the wiring harness that needs to connect into the FlipSki. And so I'm going to have to go online to find, I'm going to have to go back online to figure out which wires in this wiring harness are which again. But basically, like, you want the three, what is it? Let's look at the FlipSki wiring diagram. So it goes, on the wiring diagram, it's this one, the bottom and the rightmost. And it's got, it says number 6 on it. Right here. So it's the one that has ADC 15, ADC 2, TX, RX, ADC 1, ground, 3.3 volts, and 5 volts. And the ones that we're going to use are the ADC 1 is for the throttle. And then we're going to use the 3.3 volts. And ADC2 can be the brakes. And we're going to have to do the ground. But yeah, that's basically it. Is the 3.3 volts, goes up to the throttle, ground, and ADC1. And then ADC2 is the brakes, and that's basically it. So it's kind of like 5 wires in this thing, 4 or 5 wires, depending on if you're using the ADC2 for your brake cutoffs. And a lot of times you probably won't have to do 5 volts. You probably want to use 3.3 volts is what the throttle is going to use. So let's get this wiring harness cable stripped here with a knife. And disconnect this. So we're just going to strip enough off the end of this to get some wires split out on here so that we can connect them into a connector. And so how many are in here? Like 8? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So, alright. We're only going to use a few of them, like 4 or 5. And so I'm probably going to strip like, I don't know, maybe like an inch or something off the end, just so that I can kind of spread the wires out. Let's see. Do I have, let's look at the FlipSki. How many pins does that thing have? So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's an 8 pin that we need for that bottom one. So it looks like I've got those right here. And then I'm going to take probably like 5 of these little or I'll just cut off a row of them. Let's see here. Alright guys, so whenever I have to wire up these Bafang wiring harnesses, I always come here and I look at this GrinTech. Has a PDF. GrinTech, they have a PDF and it's called Guide to Making Motor Controllers that are CA3WP compatible. And inside of this PDF, it has on the, what is it, the second page here, the third page, it's got this connector details, and it shows the Bafang Z812 standard. And so since this is like this is a Bafang wire, so this should have the Bafang wiring colors on it right here, hopefully. They usually do. Last time I got one of these kits, I've done this before with this wiring harness that was included with this kit, so I believe this is correct. So right here we've got connector details. Let's take a screenshot. Alright, so the blue one is the throttle, so that's going to be an important one for us. So we're going to bend that blue wire outwards because that's one that we're going to terminate here. And then, so let's see, so white is the brake. Just in case we want to wire any of these other things in the future. But right now it's just kind of like 3.3 volts, ground, ADC1, and then the ADC2 for the brake. So I'm going to tape the rest of these wires kind of like back here. So I'm just crimping this last wire under one of those little metal terminal things. Oh boy, I'm a little bit excited and also slightly nervous, but I'm quite confident that this bike and this FlipSki is basically ready to go here. So, oh bud. So we've got everything wired up. We've got, alright, so everything's zip tied. So it's all routed up right here. The wiring harness is coming up with the shifter and the rear brake line. And then I just kind of, for now, it just is what it is. I've just got one brake sensor or one brake cutoff connected. I don't know if you need to plug both of the brake cutoffs in. I forget. We're gonna have to see. But I mean, everything is connected except for the battery is not connected into the FlipSki yet. That's the one last thing that we have to do right here. So FlipSki, we're just gonna take this little battery, the battery wire, and just kind of run it down here a little bit. Oh, we gotta do a twist in it. We're gonna have to do a twist. And then bring it, make sure the wires, black's going to black, red's going to red. Everything's wired up nicely. And then get that going in there. In the proper orientation. That going in there. Alright, so I've got that XT90 connected in here. And so there is going to be a little, it'll be able to move slightly. We might have to, I don't know, we'll have to see if that's like rattling or making noise. But, so now I plugged the battery in, so let's... Alright, so I've got the VESC tool app on my phone, and I'm just going to take a screen recording so that you can see what I'm doing. So you can see on my screen in the VESC tool, I've got a VESC BLE UART. So I'm going to rename this. So this is the AXUM FS. Okay, so now we can see that my e-bike has the right name, AXUM FS. So I'm gonna hit connect. And so if you didn't see your thing there, like if you didn't see it there, you could hit scan and then scan BLE. And it should find it as long as your FLIPSKY's on. Make sure that your switch is on, or else the controller won't be on, it won't show up the Bluetooth. So I'm going to connect to the AXUM FS FLIPSKY. So the first thing that we got to do is we have to do the setup motors. So click right here on setup motors. Well, actually, like before you do setup motors, you might want to configure your battery. Like let's go to additional info. So I just scrolled over. I went to motor config and then additional info right here. And then under additional info, it's got the battery cell series. So I'm going to make that 13 because that's 48 volts. And then it's got 20 amp hours of capacity. And so I'm going to have to measure the wheel diameter on this thing with my tape measure. So let's see here. I'm going to say my wheel diameter is about 745 millimeters. Might be a little bit off. I used a tape measure and I measured the front wheel from the ground up to the top of it. But that's also kind of like a taller, knobbier tire. Might be more like 740. We'll have to check it once I actually start riding it. But so you might want to set the battery cell series. And then there's also under general voltage, you might want to make sure that your battery voltage is proper. So let's see here, because this looks like this is the voltage is set for like a 36 volt battery or something. So, or no, this is set for, this is the cutoff start and end. So I think I need to increase the cutoff end to like 39 on this battery. Is when this one cuts out. The battery voltage cutoff end, I'm just kind of setting it to what that other stock controller was set to. So this is kind of like 39 volts is kind of like the cutoff point for a 48 volt battery. And so battery voltage cutoff start, you're going to want to start tapering back your battery when it gets to this point. So I'd say, so I'll cut the battery off when the cells are down to like 3.2 volts or something. So that seems reasonable. It'll start throttling back when it's at 41.6 volts, and then it'll cut off at 39 volts. Okay, so I just changed the voltage in my settings in VESC tool so that when I do this setup motors thing, it's not gonna get an error about the battery being too high voltage for the settings. So now we can go into setup motors. I'm gonna hit no. I'm not gonna reload the default settings because I just changed some settings. So right here, I'm just going to pick generic in this list up here. We're going to do generic. And then I'm not going to do anything else here. Just hit next. And then, so on this motor, I think it's kind of like a large, let's see here. So we've got the rotor spinning around on the outside. So it's a large outrunner. And then I think we changed it to motor pulls 100 for this guy. And then I forget what I used for the max power loss before. I might lower that to like 300, but you could probably use the default settings for the most part, except for we need to make sure that motor pulls for this specific Bafang G900 motor is set to 100 because it has 20 magnets on the rotor, and then the internal gearing is like 5:1, so you multiply the 20 by 5 and you get 100 effective motor pulls in VESC. So let's hit next, and it says motor selection, blah de blah. So you just want to make sure that when you do the motor selection that we just did, you don't set it to a motor size that's too large for your motor, but this is a pretty big one. So are you sure that your motor selection is within range? Yes. So here it brings me back to like the battery settings. I guess we can change it right here. That's useful. I haven't done this for a while. I forgot about that. So then for the battery current max, we're going to do 25 amps. And then the regen, I'm not doing any. And then so for the gear ratio, I'm just going to click direct drive. That just basically means that it's a hub motor. So there's my wheel diameters. Motor. So then I'm going to disable the temperature sensor because there's no temperature sensor in this motor yet. And then I'm going to hit run detection. And it's going to say detect all motors over CAN bus. That's fine. Warning, this is going to spin up all motors. Make sure nothing is in the way. So make sure that your wheel can spin. All right, we're all good. Here we go. Detecting motors. Moment of truth. So it's still spinning around a little bit down there, figuring out the Hall sensors. All right, so these are the detection results that we got from that motor setup. So it's using motor current of 80. That seems like a little bit much. So I think when I used the max power loss of 300, that was probably too much. You could probably lower the max power loss to like 200 or 250. You want the motor current to be like 62 or 63. But everything looks good there. It got the Hall sensors. So then on the next screen, you gotta set the motor direction. So let's try going forwards. There we go. So if your wheel is spinning backwards, you would check inverted and then hit forwards again to make sure that it's actually going forwards. But I'm gonna uncheck inverted because mine was going forwards properly without inverted. And then we'll hit finish. Okay. So now at this point, I'm gonna hit backup configs and I'm gonna hit OK. Because we did the motor setup and we got the configuration going. So it says backups, configuration successful. Okay. All right, so now the final step in configuring our VESC before we can use it. We're gonna go to setup input to set up the throttle. So it says which VESC is the input connected to. There's only one option, hit next. So now we're gonna select ADC input, such as conventional e-bike throttles. This little wiring harness quick and redo something. It was not correct. And thankfully I wired it up in such a way where there was no, nothing bad happening. So we're just gonna try this again. Alright guys, so I just fixed that wire. I totally messed up the wiring harness wiring for my throttle and everything. So, but I just fixed that. So it should be wired up correctly now. Alright, so I think under setup motors it should still have everything. It should still be saved. We're gonna go to setup input again. And we're gonna go back through this VESC. And we're going to do ADC input. So are you getting throttle now? Let's see here. What is going on with this? Alright guys, so I'm just kind of checking the suspension and making sure that there's no air in my suspension, so I can just kind of lean on it and it'll go up and down. Seems like my hydraulic brake could maybe just need a little bit extra slack for the hydraulic brake there, so that when I'm going up and down, seems alright. Okay, so I'm just kind of verifying that everything is working with the suspension down there. I had to add a little bit of slack to the hydraulic brake hose back there because it was a little bit tight, right here. The hydraulic hose was a little bit tight. But in terms of the suspension travel down here, it seems like it barely brushes that battery wire, only when you really bottom the suspension out, and it barely presses on it or moves it at all. So that's not going to be a problem. It seems like everything should be pretty good. It doesn't seem like it's the shock is messing with any of the wires or anything down there. Nice. Alright guys, so I did finally get the throttle working. I had to redo the wiring for this little guy, for the wiring harness. I still got to route this wire again. I've been pulling this thing on and off trying to figure out what's going on with this. But so I think we've got the throttle signal working properly. So I don't know if the colors that I was looking at here match what I found on that Grintech thing. Let's see here. So I was using this thing as a reference for the color of the wires in this Bafang wiring harness. I think the 5 volt, I don't know, I might be sending 5 volts to my throttle, but the throttle only sends back 3 point something volts max. So it seems like it's working right now, but I had to mess around with the 3.3 volts and the 5 volts, and I don't know if this table that Grintech has right here is right, or if I had some kind of an issue with my wiring. But we're gonna get back into the VESC tool and go back to setup input, which is where we left off last time.
And so you want to make sure that you don't, if you're sending 5 volts, like you don't really want to send 5 volts to the throttle unless your throttle is designed for that, right? So in general, you want to make sure that there's 3.3 volts going to your throttle. But I'm using this wiring harness, so it was a little bit confusing to figure out what was even going on. So I'm gonna hit next, but we're setting up input, so make sure that you switch it down to ADC input. And then when your throttle is actually working properly and you hit the throttle, like you should see a voltage here. So it does seem like it might be sending 5 volts up to the throttle because it's going up to 3.4 volts instead of 3.3. I think if the throttle was on 3.3 volts, it would only be going up to like 2.87 volts or something max. But, so I think I might need to still like dink around with this a little bit. I think, man, I'm not sure what the deal is. That was really weird. It was something to do with the wiring harness and how I was wiring it up to the FlipSki, but so anyways, so like as long as your throttle is like showing a voltage here, you basically just want to hit it all the way and then release the throttle halfway to get that center point mapped, and then hit applying right when it's halfway. And then so now when we let go and we hit full throttle. I might try that again. Let's see here. It's applying right at like over here. It seemed like there's a little bit of a Alright, so that should work for now. So then this is like the control type for the throttle, so we're just gonna hit right configuration, go to next. Alright. So now our throttle should work. And I've got a rubbing brake rotor. But I think once I start riding and applying the brakes, it should probably straighten out that issue with the brake rotor pretty quick here. So what does it say here? Speed? 36, 37. So we're on 48 volts, so that might be right, about 37 miles an hour unloaded. I remember when I was on 52 volts, it was going like 39 miles an hour unloaded. But it's not a huge difference between 48 volts and 52 volts. Alright, so I mean, it seems like we got the throttle going here. Alright, nice. Well, it seems like we've got it mostly set up here. I still got to get the brake, I need another brake sensor for this brake. I have it glued to a different brake lever right now, so I'm gonna have to get the magnet and the other brake sensor on here, because I think I think you have to use both brake sensors for it to work properly. So I don't have the brake sensors yet, but I mean, I'm gonna get that wiring harness kind of like tucked away and zip tied in there. And as long as this thing's going and it's a nice day out there and we're running out of days, we're running out of nice days left this year in the Northern Hemisphere. So I need to ride this thing right now. So let's go take this for the maiden voyage. The Schwinn AXUM FS maiden voyage. I gotta get some air in this shock. I'm gonna pump it up, get some air in the shock. And then we're going for a ride, bubs. We'll see you then.
Setting for your 160 pounds body weight will be significantly lower. For an e-bike, you'll likely need a bit more pressure than on a standard mountain bike to account for the additional weight of the motor and battery. A good starting point for your air pressure is between 175 and 200 psi. This range is slightly higher than the general recommendation for a non-e-bike to compensate for the bike's increased weight.
All right, guys, so what I ended up doing is I put 175 PSI into my shock, and then I sat on it, and it seemed like this thing has a sag indicator, so there's this line that goes down the C-tube, and then there's a sag indicator right here. And so this thing will come this way, and it was in between like the 20 and the 30%, maybe like 25% or something sag. So I think this rear suspension should be dialed in. And now there's nothing left but to take this bub for a ride. Let's go. Alright guys, so there it is. It's the Schwinn AXUM FS. It's converted into an e-bike with the Bafang G0900 hub motor, 750 watt hub motor. It's got the FLIPSKI 75100 Pro V2 controller. Powallan 48 volt 20 amp hour triangle battery. Use code EBIKEBUILDER50 at powallan-e.com on the 48 volt 20 amp hour battery for $50 off. You can also use EBIKEBUILDER25 for $25 off of the 52 volt battery, triangle battery. Got a couple codes there. So these rear tires sound kind of interesting going on the road. Sounds like kind of a little hum. But yeah, so we're gonna take this thing and ride it down the streets towards the mountain biking trails, where we're gonna put it to the true test. We got the Schwalbe Magic Mary on the front. It's feeling good. The Fox Float suspension and the Marzocchi bomber fork make me feel like I'm floating on top of some kind of cloud. It's like I'm floating on a cloud with wheels. It feels pretty good to pedal. I think this medium AXUM FS might fit me a little bit better than the large FS2 slalom bike, my other one. So let's just cruise down the streets for a minute, and then we'll get to the trails and go riding around. This suspension feels really good. I can barely feel any of the little bumps. Brakes are feeling pretty good. The guide tees. Making our way down the streets. The leaves are starting to change colors. I haven't gone on a bike ride for a few days here. The leaves have started changing colors. It's been getting colder at night, is what did it, I think. So someone in the comments in the build video or in the teardown video was saying that I should switch the brake lever and the shifter around, but this is like the only way that I could get it to work, where I could do the shifter and then still reach the brake lever. Like when I did it the other way around, this guide T-brake has this funny like matchmaker clamp on it that's in the way right here, and I couldn't, when I put the shifter over here, like it just didn't fit, and then the shifter was out of my reach. So this is how it is for now. So we're just cruising down the street going towards the trails. Some kind of a game going on back there with a bunch of kids. Alright, I'll see you guys at the trails.
Alright, we're just arriving at the trail. I do think I will have to probably change my shifter around. Like, it would be better to have the brake on the inside and the shifter on the outside, but I couldn't fit it properly with this particular brake lever and this shifter. Okay, let's get the GoPro into hyperview maybe. Alright guys, GoPro ran out of batteries, but we're back. I'm having a lot of fun on the AXUM FS. It fits me pretty well. Maybe like slightly too small, but I think when you're riding around, like I might prefer a bike that's just slightly too small maybe, because you can just like move it around and maneuver it a little bit easier. There were certain points where on the FS2 slalom, it kind of felt like I was on top of the bike and not really like in the bike. I was right in between the medium and the large on the slalom, and so I got the large, and like 99% of the time it feels really good. I still like that bike. I still have the TSDZ8 on it, and I plan to keep using that FS2 slalom bike, but I've been scheming up this plan for a while, and I wanted to execute it this year before the season ends, because I do think it's worked out pretty well here. I forgot to check if the GoPro screen was cleared off. I thought I might have gooped it. Let's see here. There we go. What an awesome day out here, wow. Oh! I better get a finger on the brake lever. I want to take a moment here just to look at the rear suspension stuff, just to make sure that everything seems like it's holding together. Seems pretty good. This is awesome, Bubs. Wow, it looks good too. I really like how it turned out. Man, my goggles. I gotta give these damn things up. Man, this is so awesome. Oh, this don't went off the trail right there. That could have been bad. It's my front tire.
I don't even know if I'm going to be able to put the brake cutoffs on these guide T brakes because of how modulaty they are. Oh no. Brake cutoffs, I don't know if they're always necessary. This may be better for like the average person, but I don't know if I need the brake cutoffs. Whoa. This rear tire is working okay. Oh. I've been practicing jumping that skinny, and sometimes I do it good, and sometimes it's a little bit crazy like that. Oh. Now that I've tried the Fox factory float rear shock, I don't know that I'll ever be able to do a crappy one again. Wow. Oh. What a day out here, wow. feel like I can weave through there a lot easier on this bike. Wow. We're going up the Hummingbird Trail. Going under the bridge. So it seems like I did a pretty good job of building this thing so it's not like rattling and making all kinds of crazy noises and stuff, so nice. It was worth the extra little bit of effort, taking my time so that it's not all rattly. You kind of have to have your bike in good order to record YouTube videos, or else you'll have a rattly bike and it'll be annoying to watch it. But I ride my bike so much that they always start rattling. So it's kind of like a constant struggle to keep my bike maintained so that I can make videos without rattling noises. I'm actually surprised this phone mount isn't rattling because I thought it would be. Oh. What a perfect day out here, wow. Incredible. Little chipmunk, red squirrel or something. All right, we need to establish what voltage we're at. Let's see here. Because I do have a backpack battery, but I don't especially feel like, sort of 46 volts. Yeah. So I think I'm gonna call it for now on this. Oh. Usually I ride here with the backpack battery connected to my bike so that I can go further while I'm here on the triangle battery without the wire in my way. However, today I just didn't feel like having that damn wire dangling around. I don't know if the backpack battery wire, it might have been kind of in the way today. Like, I haven't totally got the wiring down there prepared for a backpack battery that could just yoink out at full power at any moment. So we're just gonna call it for there today. Keep this video a little bit shorter, but I do think that this bike is awesome and I really like it. And we're just cruising back. And I'm pretty stoked about this. Rear tire seems alright. I had a full PSI, the rear tire. It was only like 36 or something, I think is what it said. But rear tire's working alright. We got this front chainring that came on the bike. It's not even like a fully narrow wide, it's just kind of like narrow, kind of narrow wide. Didn't drop the chain at all. And it feels very awesome to be cruising down the street right here with the wind blowing on me on the new AXUM FS e-bike that was built on the e-bike builder channel. So make sure you guys let me know in the comments, what do you think about the AXUM FS e-bike with the Bafang G900 motor. It did go a little bit faster on my 52 volt battery with the Samsung 40 T3 cells. Slightly faster on the battery that I built compared to this battery that is a little bit smaller and it doesn't have high discharge cells. It's got like 5,000 milliamp hour, like kind of like high capacity cells in this battery. But the purpose of this triangle battery is for riding around at the trails, and I'll just get my backpack battery figured out and then we'll be golden. So thanks for watching, guys. I'm really enjoying this bike. It feels really awesome to ride. The shock is a game changer, as well as that Marzocchi bomber fork that I invested in. I don't even know like how much faster the TSDZ8 is in this, but there's just something that's more enjoyable about riding this motor on the street as compared to that TSDZ8. The throttle on the TSDZ8 was a little bit annoying. Like, I wish that was better. But I really like this motor. It's kind of my favorite. So awesome. This new motor, so this is the new motor out of the box. It doesn't have the temperature sensor in it, so that's why the temperature in VESC says 0 today. But it's kind of a cool day. It's like 60 something, 66 degrees out or something, so I'm not too concerned about the motor temperature today.
thanks for watching, guys. I'm gonna jam out to some tunes and go back. Later, bubs. Thanks for watching. Alright, here we go, guys. Monopoly pull, Monopoly peel. Get off of there, bub. Peel right here, peel here. What do we got? St. Charles Place. That one to win. Wow. I want to sell that on eBay. Alright, they're coming for me. I gotta go. Peace out. Alright guys, I popped in the 52 volt 8 amp hour battery with the 40T3 cells. So we got a little bit more voltage now. Hopefully the backpack battery wire is long enough. Oh! Definitely feels a little more punchy on 52 volts, I would say. I hope this car sees me. Excellent. Trying not to pull out the battery. Even though this is a smaller battery, oh boy. Even though this is a smaller battery, I can tell a difference from the cells, I think. I wish there we go. We're really cruising. I definitely like this motor better on 52 volts, but when you're going on the trails, you don't really need 52 volts. Man, we're really flying now. Wow. This thing feels so awesome. This is my favorite bike. Nothing rattling. Everything is working smoothly. Oh, there's a duck or a goose that got hit by a car back there. But there's also 30 or 40 other geese remaining. Wow, this battery really moves. I like this. We are cruising, oh my goodness. My G900 sounds like